Hi everyone. Practice for the week this week was 16th note pentatonic, so I was just ascending and descending in groups of 4. So I'll show you how I got on, and then I thought it would be interesting to just talk about how I go about practicing this kind of stuff, because the approach is very similar irrespective of whether you do this kind of crazy fingerstyle stuff or whether you work in pentatonics or any other scales. You approach it in the same kind of way. Anyway, let me show you how I got on this week. So how do I approach practicing this kind of stuff? Well, I tend to break it down into 2 phases. The first phase is where I start to develop the patterns, and I have to slow it right down. So what I tend to do is to just focus on the individual notes to start with. So let's say I'm descending in groups of 4 like I was. I'd do something like this to start with. So that's the first 4 notes of that pattern, and I know that I'm always going to play it in that way. So the first 3 notes are on the same string, and then there's the 4th note. So the thing I'm thinking about there is how do I transition from that note to that note cleanly, because what I don't want to do is get that kind of sound out. So what I actually do is when I put my 3rd finger down, I'm actually resting against the first string, so that string can't vibrate anymore. So not only am I fretting for the next note, I'm also killing the previous note. I'm also stopping the previous note from ringing out. And then there's 2 ways I can play the next pattern, which is what I tend to do, or the way I play this is I go down, and there's my 3rd finger, and now I flatten, and the act of flattening my 3rd finger releases that previous note again. And there you can see my little finger reaching out. And again my little finger's flattened, and that's actually killing the top 2 strings. And so this is what I'm working out when I first start to learn these runs, is how am I going to play the note and how am I going to kill the other strings, how am I going to stop the other strings from ringing. And you do that bit by bit until you've got the entire run under your fingers, and then it's a matter of just building the motor patterns, just ingraining those motor patterns, and that's really the second phase. Once you know how you're going to move around that particular pattern, it's about putting the hours in. You need to get the hours in order to get the pattern under your fingers. And you don't need the same amount of conscious involvement in that. So once I know how I'm going to play a particular phrase, I'll go and unplug my guitar and go and sit and watch the telly or something like that and just start working on these patterns until they're well and truly under my fingers. And those are really the two phases of learning something like this, where the first phase would be understanding how you're going to move around the pattern and really sort of focusing on how you're going to use the fingers, how you're going to play the notes and how you're going to stop the notes from ringing. And then the next phase is just building up those motor skills. So that's how I do it. Hopefully that was useful for you. And I'll see you next time.